Hi, do you want to send a tribute to Nelson Mandela? A question as loaded as police guns pointed at strikers in South Africa today. But this week that's been the question on the lips of British TV presenters, those free-thinking individuals who all happen to think exactly the same way. But how would it be possible to think otherwise? Just how churlish would any criticism have to be? Well, let's see. Everybody reveres Nelson Mandela. He's like a god, except he really exists. But now it seems everyone always loved Nelson Mandela, and now it seems everyone always hated apartheid. Amnesia, the grease that oils our culture. Given how universally popular Nelson Mandela appears to be, and apparently always was, it's amazing the apartheid regime managed to cling on for so long. And it's amazing how many British businesses were happy to do deals with it. And it's amazing that British arms manufacturers, the best in the world of course, we're very proud, were happy to arm the apartheid regime. And it's amazing that some British conservatives called for Nelson Mandela to be hung as a terrorist. Nelson Mandela, a terrorist? Surely the only force Nelson would ever have employed was the force of a good, strong moral argument. Now, I've never had any trouble with the ANC's armed struggle. My problem's with the programme, by which I don't mean the glossy brochure of a rock concert. The ANC won South Africa's first truly democratic elections hands down. So, what happened? Well, Nelson Mandela may have saved South Africa, but he saved it on behalf of capital. I think Nelson Mandela does himself a bit of a disservice, because he tends to describe himself as a simple country boy, but in fact he comes from one of the country's traditional ruling families. Nelson Mandela is effectively royalty. And the ANC used to describe itself as a communist organisation, though it dropped the term when it became unpopular. Oh yes, yes, we may have produced 27 folk albums, but we were always rock and roll at heart. It's just show business. The ANC was never genuinely a communist organisation, it's a nationalist organisation, the clue's in the title. The ANC was fighting against a particularly vicious form of oppression, of course, apartheid. But single-issue campaigns, however major the issue may be, are never going to be the real answer. For example, if you're being attacked because you're a black, Jewish, lesbian, single mother, which form of oppression do you want to stop? Oppression against black people, against Jews, against women, against lesbians, against single mothers, or all those forms of oppression? Well, surely you'd want them all to stop, and you'd want them to stop pretty sharpish. Today in South Africa, capitalism is still fully in control. The truly rich people in the country are still white. Most whites enjoy comparatively luxurious lifestyles, though there are a few black yuppies driving around in new sports cars. But, well, we don't want to know about all that, because apartheid's finished, end of story, draw a line underneath it and move on. Nelson Mandela himself, of course, certainly did move on, straight into the welcoming arms of show business. And boy does he have the photographs to prove it. Here's Nelson with the Spice Girls. And what do the Spice Girls know about suffering other than how to inflict it? And here, inevitably, is Nelson Mandela with Bono, the patron saint of smugness. Sometimes I feel I may be the only person in the world not to have had his photo taken with Nelson Mandela. Now, I have no personal feelings about him at all. I've never met him. I don't suppose you have either. Nelson Mandela may genuinely be a really nice bloke, but that's not the point. The point is, he's used as a really powerful symbol. When the ANC were drawing closer and closer to power in South Africa, they were drawing further and further away from their own people, their own supporters, and they required Nelson Mandela's unquestioned moral authority as a smokescreen. His moral authority to a large extent rests on his long period of imprisonment, but it has to be pointed out there were plenty of other ANC members, many of whom had more radical views, also in prison, and many of them received much harsher treatment than he did. The ANC's been in power in South Africa now for 14 years. Oh, sorry, I should say only 14 years. Only 14 years. We mustn't be too impatient, must we? This is the parliamentary road to socialism. It may seem like a dead end, but I'm sure good times are just around the corner. Meanwhile, black trade unionists can console themselves that when they're on the picket lines, those hands on the police guns, those hands on the batons, those hands on the tear gas canisters, they're black hands now, free at last. And all the poor people in South Africa can console themselves that the government has oversees the gap between the rich and the poor. It's a democratic government. Yes, we're all free now. Given its natural mineral resources, given its industrial base and its workforce, South Africa could become the powerhouse for a socialist revolution across the entire continent. But what's actually happening today in South Africa? Well, migrant workers are being killed in racist attacks. Migrant workers are being deported by the police. And how do the police recognise people as being migrants? Well, one of the ways in which they do, they sometimes pull over people because their skin colour is considered to be too dark to be true South Africans. Now imagine if Nelson Mandela had led South Africa towards a genuinely socialist revolution. Would Nelson Mandela's 90th birthday be being celebrated today in London? Well, it certainly wouldn't be being celebrated with a fawning press. It wouldn't be being celebrated with an all-star rock concert. And it wouldn't be being celebrated with a sign saying, Nelson Mandela, sold out. Remember, the main enemy is always at home. We just need to find the address. Bye.